Alright, small update this week. It was something else I ordered, but it's going to take a while to ship. I mean, like, it's shipped, but, yeah, it'll take a while to arrive. As you can see, it's the first time in a while that I've opened up. This plastic feels different than normal. It's been a while since I've opened up a One Piece on camera, because normally I opened it up for my Friday friend, but, like I said, he's traveling. What the fuck? Now I almost wonder if this is fake. This is weird plastic. I'm pretty sure I ordered from Amazon itself. This feels normal-ish. Well. Why do I have my doubts? What was the last thing I got? Because, see, I'm looking at this and I'm just trying to compare, because I noticed that this image goes below the bottom, which I actually see Nami's foot doing there as well. Let's see. Okay, well, here's a Season 13 Voyage 1, and it goes all the way to the bottom like that. So I guess it's just been doing that. But very strange. Huh. There's a whole cake out of it. So, okay, probably a real thing. It's the plastic that's definitely weird. Yeah, as you can see, I keep the others kind of nearby. You got disc 1s and disc 2s of it. But unfortunately, this was all I really had for today. So, I guess we're going to just spend the rest of this video talking about video games and watched anime and stuff. Alright. I'm trying to think where to start on the list, just because I guess I just start with the stuff that's other stuff. So, for some reason this week I decided to, I guess, give The Strongest Sage with the Weakest Crest a shot. You know, I'd watched 2 episodes before, so I started over from the beginning. I don't remember if I was watching it as it was live or if I was watching an English dub. And I've seen 6 episodes, and it's kind of a weak series. Not necessarily bad. And there's definitely some interesting ideas in there, which I was wondering if I was thinking were different anime, but no, that was this one. But the main problem with it, you know, having watched 6 episodes, is I guess the story is just not very engaging. There's elements of it that are definitely very Mary Sue-ish, which is quite unfortunate, because, you know, normally you associate that with somebody making a fan work for something that already exists. But I think some of the same qualities are there. And maybe it's better than those, just because, you know, the main problem with, and, you know, the original title of the Mary Sue kind of character came from a Star Trek fan fiction where somebody self-inserted themselves into Star Trek the original series, and it's my understanding that they were just better than everybody else at everything, and all the characters, all the established characters, just liked them. And for the most part, people kind of understood that the reason people really didn't like a story like that is because, well, maybe for that person it's just like, oh, it would be really awesome if I was there and everybody liked me. For most people watching it, it just feels like the rules of the universe are bending for that character's bending at that character's will. And I think it's interesting because I think Strongest Sage, Weakest Crest kind of does that, even though it's not taking an established thing and doing it. It's just more like every time our main character talks to somebody else, it really just seems like it was just conveniently done or set up for our main character's sake. For the most part. I mean, some of it is, like I said, there's definitely some neat ideas speckled or spread in there, but, you know, it's still one of those things where just like, maybe not the most engaging thing ever per se. I don't remember what it was rated, but I think some people probably enjoyed it. And again, it's probably because there are some enjoyable elements to it, but yeah, some things about it are kind of weird. Let's see if I can at least talk a little bit about some of that stuff. You know, this is the one thing that I actually watched more than one episode than like everything else, right? And let's see. I guess maybe some of the good things to talk about first. Like, I like the idea of, okay, this character reincarnated, but they found out that, you know, there's a lot of lost knowledge, and it was an actual conspiracy theory. And that's actually kind of interesting. Likewise, I think the dragon's kind of interesting. Like, her personality's very different, not as catery as I would have thought, but at the same time, you know, not catery enough. It's a weird kind of aloofness that's just kind of interesting, but it just also sort of is, and its execution is kind of an example of what I'm talking about with the rules thing. It's just like, okay, well, they established that there's this dragon that he had a past relationship with, and he suggests to her, oh, why don't you just take on a human form and just travel with us? And it's sort of like, I didn't feel like there was necessary motivation for her to choose to do that. Not that we don't understand why she did do that, but it's like, it was just kind of set up as a thing where it's like, yeah, well, of course we want to take the dragon, turn it into a girl, and have her there. And I would say some other anime have definitely done things like that better. Oh, and I guess that's transitioning into, and what are some of the things that didn't work? One of the things that doesn't really work for me for the show, 6 episodes in at least, I don't have a very good feeling for what the different crests necessarily do. Part of the problem is that while it kind of establishes, I think it's said, but at least the first 3 crests did. I'm not exactly sure I understand why the 4th crest is different and why he would have specifically wanted it, why he shouldn't have something that powerful in his hands or something like that. Like, every time I think I've got vague ideas, I'm like, I guess this show hasn't explained it, unless it has and I just missed it, and that could be a me thing. But it's probably the worst offender, because it seems like not only the most important thing, but it's core in there at the very beginning of the show. But like I said, you know, they mentioned the other crests, and I guess the second one is better at, was it bows and arrows or range? I don't know. So, I'm not sure if I'm going to finish it or not. It really, I guess, depends on what ends up happening this week. But one of the things that definitely stopped me was episode 6 was a bit of a breather point where I'm not quite sure where it's planning to go after that. Maybe they said something and I'm not remembering. I guess I did say that, but you know, it's now competing with Pokemon, and it's kind of hard to compete with Pokemon if you're not great. Well, that's it. Going through stuff. Hulk episode 10. Let's see. I do remember this episode being a little strange, mostly because it felt, while it was kind of aligned with bringing the show in the direction that, you know, the forward direction that it needed, it doesn't feel like it's bringing it there at the pace I would have thought if it was trying to go to something important for some of the story related stuff per se. It may have been kind of digging up information that's is seemingly initially tangentially related to stuff, but then turns out to be completely related. You know, I'm kind of curious about some of that, but this episode wasn't really about any of that. Kind of a transitionary episode, because I guess it kind of did a sort of parody of certain concepts, I guess. Battle shows, especially battle shows that involve cooking. And it didn't do it in such a way that's just like, okay, yeah, this is way too obviously that. It just was kind of amusing, but, you know, And I do appreciate the fact that it does involve our main characters, and I like seeing our main characters. Helk and Anne are good together. Wish I could remember her real name, but Anne from management. But it was okay. As long as you understand when I say okay, what mixes of stuff I thought was going on there. Entertaining. A Sacrificial Princess and the King of Beasts, episode 22. A really good follow-up episode from the previous one, and definitely setting up for a series finale of some sort. Like, I don't see how it could do an entire season after this sort of stuff, or even an entire core of stuff after this point, and still feel relevant. That wouldn't necessarily mean it wouldn't have entertaining stuff happen in it, but it feels like this show is closing in on its major themes and probably capping them off. So I'm kind of hoping that it's going to be a good finale, because I kind of like what it set up. Reborn as a Vending Machine, I Now Wander the Dungeon, episode 11. What even happened in this episode? I guess they established some of that stuff. Something that was a pseudo-touching scene, but at the same time, not fully... Like, I guess there wasn't much purpose that came from it. Unless the follow-up episode has something, but if they're setting up for a core finale, or a season finale, or a series finale, it doesn't feel like it. Like, I guess it might be an important thing, but for the most part, it just sort of feels like, it's a thing, it just happened. Let's see, Undead Murder Farce, episode 11. Fuck those people. You probably understand exactly what I'm talking about, but it's definitely an interesting setup given what has happened up to this point in this portion of the story. So, it's still a neat setup. Just fuck those people. The Great Cleric, episode 11. I guess they are setting up for big finale sort of thing. And this later half of this season, or core, or whatever, has definitely been more entertaining. Mostly because it doesn't feel as stuck in the concept. Even though the show does sort of spin its wheels a little bit. It slides a little bit in that regard. So you can almost say like the first half was pretty much only this stuff, and the second half was pretty much only this stuff. But I've definitely found the second stuff to be more entertaining. If there's any problem I have with it, I feel like it's kind of inconsistent in terms of power leveling to a certain degree. And I don't know how to say it without spoiling too much, but, it's a weird inconsistency. Not bad, but weird, but I don't know, I guess we'll see what happens next. The Most Heretical Last Boss Queen, From Villainess to Savior, episode 11. Some touching stuff following up from the previous episode. I mentioned the previous episode did have some really touching moments to it. This one had stuff that happened that was fine, interesting stuff. Some good unexpected twists in there. Nothing huge twists, I would say, but interesting ones. And I guess kind of curious where the next episode's going to be, because it was done kind of neat, and it does touch on some of those somber aspects to the show that sometimes it has. And this one isn't one directly related to some of the other somber stuff. I guess I would call it the main somber stuff, but, just sort of other stuff that's come up along the way. So overall, if the next episode is the last one, then guess I'm curious to see how this season ends. It doesn't feel like it's the end, though. Next up, Rurouni Kenshin, 2023, episode 11. I guess if there's anything about this that was fine, it's like I mentioned last time, one of the problems I have is when these shows, special shows that tend to be shonen leaning, which I think Rurouni Kenshin could be described as, they eventually reach a point where it's like, okay, well, this person's going to handle this, and this person's going to handle this, and this person's going to handle this. It's sort of, oh, well, now we've kind of broken it up into I guess, a battle tournament thing where we have to exercise all of our characters having a one-on-one. So, that sort of stuff kind of drains me a bit. It disillusions me to where I'm like, I'm not sure if I feel like this is the way things would actually be, or something like that. So it's breaking me out of the main story. And I mentioned Yu Yu Hakusho being something that I remember making me exhausted, and maybe that's part of what made it hard for me to continue on with that. Well, that, and I was watching it with my brother, I think, and we didn't continue watching it, maybe. Could be mistaken. Because that was also random. But anyways, the point is, at least it's not so bad, because usually when that sort of thing happens, you'll have an episode that get dedicated to one thing, if it's only one episode, and then the next episode is the next thing, and so it kind of becomes an excuse for a series to kind of drag things out a little bit, which is probably part of the reason why I don't like it. But at least in this one, it at least got 2 of them out of the way in once, and maybe it's already making its way towards finale, I suppose. Not necessarily to say that the next episode would be a finale, but rather that it did feel like it reached the place. I guess since this was episode 11, if they're going for 12 or 13 episodes, they probably want to wrap up the important thing of the story arc in the next episode or episode and a half. So that could make sense. But, it's okay. It was still entertaining stuff. So maybe it got through the parts that would normally have been done slower back in the 90s, and because they didn't do it so slow, maybe it was more tolerable. I don't know. Reign of the Seven Spellblades, episode 11. I guess interesting stuff happened. As usual, the problem is Seven Spellblades has some interesting stuff, and it barely kind of introduced, okay, here's something that's something like a main theme to the show, a kind of direction kind of given halfway through, but it doesn't feel like they're setting that stuff up, and instead it feels like it did set up at the end of this something that happened just after the credits, which I guess is something that they sort of talked about before, but it still feels like it just kind of came out of nowhere. And the shows, it can feel kind of random in that regard. I'm not sure if all the characters necessarily also feel completely realistic to a certain degrees. Like, they don't feel like shallow stereotypes, but they feel like deep stereotypes sometimes. Stereotypes that I don't know if they can actually functionally exist in the real world. So it makes me question whether they can functionally exist there. But it's all weird stuff, and I guess we'll see what the next episode is, and it might be a season finale or something. My unique skill makes me OP even at level 1, episode 11. I guess a very strange thing to happen in there, although I'd have to say that I don't feel like people are showing the appropriate level of wariness, and the logic on why the main thing started happening is questionable. Well, I guess we'll just have to see where it goes from there, because it just sort of is, I suppose. The Misfit of Demon King Academy, Season 2, Episode 11. An entertaining episode, although it felt a little off, and I think the little off is just a smorgasbord of stuff that's kind of highly relevant to the complex, but feels like there could be some coherency that I'm missing. State of the world, and that all sounds like a bunch of stuff, but it basically means that episode 11 here felt like it tied up some threads, not loose threads, because it hasn't done the main story, but it feels like it tied up some threads so that once this final episode happens, assuming there's one more episode, maybe there's 2 more episodes, but at least when the next episode happens, it feels like it'll tie. It'll basically probably conclude the main story without leaving dangling threads, possibly. And I think that's fine. It means that as a possible penultimate episode, could be a penultimate conflict episode or something like that. But as that, it basically meant that, okay, it kind of showed the interesting things with all of its other characters and them doing their own neat things, which is good. And it's probably saving what I hope is the best for last because, well, first of all, the show's called The Misfit of Demon King Academy, and that's, of course, referring to our main character, the reborn Demon King. And the interesting thing that this show does is make it relevant for us to watch what he does, which it does a really good job. And I think season 2 just felt like it had some hiccups in there per se. Not necessarily that they treated the character wrong so much as it's like, okay, well, you're doing this thing and we're looking for him to do that ultimate badass thing that makes us go, oh yes, that's why we're watching this. Because so far it's been pretty badass stuff, but he's mostly not shown his brightest in this conflict yet. And so that's I guess what I'm waiting to see, and I'm hoping the next episode gives that. It feels like it probably could. I'll have to watch it to find out. Am I actually the strongest? Episode 10. Did they do something at the end of the episode to kind of lead into a potential season finale? Some of the interaction with some of the characters is a little strange to describe, but fine, because I guess it kind of gave hints that things had been that way. And I guess it's kind of good because they're kind of acting against stereotypes in a certain way. Maybe not stereotypes is the right word. I think they're acting against common tropes. And it's appreciative. I think the only reason I don't appreciate it more is because I'm not sure what it's planning to do with it when it's planning to do stuff with it. So I guess I'm waiting to see what it's going to do. It did have a revelation in the episode that was like, oh, I guess I didn't expect that. And maybe that feels like, oh yes, this could be something closer to a season finale, a core finale sort of thing. Because it ties better into the themes with the entire show. And that's so that I've actually rewatched a couple of parts from a couple of episodes just to be like, oh yeah, that's what happened. So, I'd only call it an okay episode, but curious to see where it's going to go from here. Classroom for Heroes, episode 11. I would say, so like I've been describing, the show's been one where it's like, okay, it doesn't feel like it's dealing with a lot of themes related to the underlying premise. A lot of the more recent episodes have leaned more heavily on, here's our interesting cast of characters doing an interesting cast of things. But I'd say this episode is finally getting back to that, and it's definitely setting up for finale sort of stuff, since it's part one of at least a two-parter. Maybe it's a three-parter. I'm kind of expecting a two-parter and for it to be a 12-episode series. I could look this up and probably find out, but I keep not doing that. Like, the only reason I know the length of some of these series are core just because High Dive shows all the episodes that they're going to be showing. So, but, yeah. An interesting episode. I think whether or not this is great and great for the series depends on what the follow-up episode, what happens, I guess. Next up, Jobless Reincarnation, Season 2, Episode 11. That's obviously far less than 11 right there. I guess I was a little worried about what this episode might do, and if there's any complaint I'd have with it, it's that we need the next episode already. Not that I would say that watching this one was the most exciting episode, but this is the one where they could have most easily screwed it up, because we've been dreading, I mean, maybe it's just me that's been dreading, maybe a lot of y'all have not, but so I should say I've been dreading when the series was going to approach what this episode did, because it feels to me like it's too easy to make something that feels genuine, I suppose, but or is intended to feel genuine, but actually just feels fake, I suppose. And no, I'd say the way this one was executed while it had its strangeness, did not feel like a bad strangeness, but rather a really good job of actually feeling kind of genuine. And the only problem with that is it's time to see what happens after that, because I guess it ended just at the really genuine feeling part, the kind of heartwarming part, and now it's like, okay, but we don't get to see what happens next, and so we're kind of left feeling just a little bit hanging, I suppose. So, I'm definitely looking forward to the next episode. Dark Gathering, episode 11. Yeah, if they're going for a core finale, they definitely got something that's kind of big, but it doesn't feel like it because, while there's dangerous stuff going on, there's been plenty of dangerous stuff that's gone on here, and it doesn't feel like dangerous stuff here is necessarily super related to a lot of the stuff that's built up in the series per se. A little bit, but I don't know how to describe that without spoiling some of the stuff that's happened. So I guess it's just intriguing. But I guess I'm mostly curious what episode 12 is going to do, because, well, because of thoughts, I suppose. Zom 100, Bucket List of the Dead, episode 8. This was a fun episode. Not necessarily one of the greater episodes, just a fun episode. Zom 100 back to being fun episodes. Like, I kind of commented the previous 2 episodes. It's like, oh, maybe that's stuff that would happen, but I don't know if it's enjoyable to watch. There's this kind of watching these people in the zombie apocalypse kind of with an atypical look on life sort of thing that's just been kind of neat about it, I suppose. And this one was all about it. They introduced the other character from the opening finally, and I think they're perfectly fine in there. The only thing that I would complain about is, I can't help but feel like they might run into 1 or 2 other people. It's like, why didn't they bring that person with them? Even though that was a kind of magical moment. I guess a couple of kind of magical moments in this episode. Nothing like breathtaking from my perspective, but just kind of a nice episode. And then finally, Level 1 Demon Lord and One Room Hero, episode 12. This one is kind of a complete wrap-up of everything, I think. A wrap-up of the main story that was going on, some of the little relationships individual people had outside of that, which I'd say is kind of a weakness because it feels like there should be more relationship going on with our titular characters, or at least one of them, not the other, or maybe both. But there wasn't that. So there's a bit of a unfulfilled feeling there, a little bit. But at the same time, our 2 titular characters were just kind of there, and it was just kind of pleasant and a little heartwarming, their interactions at least, and some of the others were just like, okay, and now we get to see some other stuff we want to see. It doesn't feel like there should be anything more to this series, but I guess they could always have another conflict or something like that. Overall, enjoyable. So there we go. That's everything I watched this week. Playing stuff, I'm not sure if I've got anything super notable in Dead by Daylight. That one's just being played. Although, finally over the weekend I got the energy to fire Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. So mostly Violet. Scarlet I've just done a tiny bit of stuff, just mostly some bookkeeping stuff, but I've only started playing the DLC on Violet. I'm not that far along. For those of you who know, I've only done the second picture, and I'm kind of at a point where I'm enjoying wandering a bit, but I guess I'm finally going to head for the third picture. If you don't want to know what I mean, don't think about it too much. I'm just saying that, I'm going kind of slow. I'm enjoying, let's just catch Pokemon. I'm not sure how everybody else played, because I did see that some people on Reddit were posting, okay, these are the characters, or this is my party going into the DLC. And for me, I just sort of picked some of my playthrough Pokemon from before and said, oh, this seems to be an okay balance, and I have my 2 capture things Pokemon here. Probably the only interesting thing is I did do, I did solo, I think 3 of the 6-star things. And I definitely wanted to because, like, oh, that's a Pokemon I haven't caught yet in this game. Some of them definitely required some thought. Like, I had a Dark-type Crawdont, and it's like, that motherfucker hits with Dark. So painful. So painful. But then eventually I kind of realized, you know, I can solo this with an Avalugg. The idea being that, okay, if he's obsessed with hitting on the defensive side, then I can choose a Pokemon that's that uses an Iron Defense Body Press strategy. And I chose Avalugg. I just never had a chance to use them before. And, you know, they were mostly just healing every turn because I also had Snowscape up. You know, I made it snow. That caused me to heal. But it also boosts my defense by 50%, I think it was. Which I think makes me more powerful until I terrestrialize into the fighting type. But, you know, the point is, you know, he couldn't do enough damage to me to really make me have to use a heal cheer even. I just kind of buffed up and then sat on him until he died. In retrospect, probably an even better Pokemon to use against him, if I could remember all of his moves, maybe Como using a body press strategy, because he resists both water and dark. It's like, I know he has Aqua Jet and Crab Hammer and Crunch. I just don't remember what his 4th move was, and that could make a difference. But with Como, he may actually be a very interesting option for Iron Defense Body Press, just because he also has access to Screech. And so you put a bell on him, a shell bell, and probably quicker than some of the other body press users, he can be going up there and doing massive amounts of damages 1 turn earlier than a lot of the others. And while his defense isn't like astronomical, it's still its highest stat, which I never really thought about, but it's like, oh, wow, that's actually kind of neat. HP's a bit meh. So you definitely be doing that sort of strategy because the resistances are just right, and its resistances might be just right. And the other nice thing about it is being Dragon Fighting means that it actually gets stab on body press, which most of the other body press users don't really have, because, you know, fighting isn't really known for having its high defense stat. So, you know, that's something that'd be interesting to play with. Let me see. I got to bring out the tablet snail thingy against that guy, just because all of his stabs would be not very effective, and, you know, sunny day, growth, and then you just start Giga Draining. Yeah, for some of these you have to see, okay, this boss never seems to clear your stats. I think he never cleared my stats. So that made him potentially good for that. He might have also been good for Crawdont, just because he also resists both those stabs I mentioned before, while at the same time... well, the problem with the Crawdont one is sometimes he gets lucky and gets a defense drop on you. And that would be bad if you just can't recover it. But the other portion of it is he tends to clear his own negative and your debuffs, so spending most of your time setting up with something that isn't going to, like, nail him to the floor, yeah, it doesn't work as well. But, I don't know, that's tough. So yeah, I remember getting those 2 Pokemon. I just don't remember what the 3rd one was. And I haven't checked what tonight's is, but, you know, it's whatever. If I there's not much tonight left anyway, so I might not do anything with it. But overall, it's kind of nice. There's a part of me that's expecting more out of it, and I don't think it's the logical part of my brain. I think it's the part that's just like, I guess I'm used to playing a Pokemon game, in other words, and Scarlet Violet kind of gave me that impression. I mean, there's definitely elements of it that are, like, you know, changed from a couple of decades ago or whatever, But at the same time, there's still something about it that just feels Pokemon game. Like, I kind of expect, okay, well, here's team baddies, and here's story creeping itself in, and this is just a small version in DLC. Yes? No? And the answer is no. It almost just feels like you're in this area, there's a lot of Pokemon for you to get and do, and, it's just kind of an excuse to just have fun in there again, but maybe not necessarily get a super engaging story. I'm waiting to see. It's not been bad, it's just waiting to see, I guess. So, overall, interesting. Don't know if I have much else to really comment on, though. So maybe I guess I wrap things up here. Y'all, have a nice week.